Welcome back to my Photoshop tutorial for Ascension's Atlas Map Style. You should have completed up through step 55 by this point, so let's keep moving. Step 56, hide layer mountains and select layer hills. Repeat the last filter with dialog, so Ctrl-Alt-F. If the shortcut doesn't work for you because you closed Photoshop after doing step 55, you can just manually run it again by going to the filter menu, Render, Lighting Effects. For CS6, in the control panel, go to Presets and select Atlas Hills. And if you're in 5.1 or earlier, click the Style drop-down box and choose Atlas Hills. And click OK to confirm the settings. Hide layer Hills and select layer Land. And repeat the last filter, Ctrl-F. And that puts that same lighting effect filter on this layer. Alright, so let's check our layer order before moving on. This is probably a pretty good time to save as well. Pause the video and compare my layers to yours. Make sure you have all the same layers I do, in the same order, and that the same layers are visible or hidden. When you're done, collapse Group Ocean Group. Alright, make sure layer Land is selected. And create a selection from layer base, so Control-click on the layer thumbnail. Invert selection, Control-Shift-I. Delete selected, delete. And deselect, Control-D. Now let's add an outer glow layer style, Alt-L-Y-O. Blend mode set to screen. Opacity is 25%. For the color, click the solid color box, not the gradient bar. Set that to 40C8FF, which should be a light blue. Okay. And set the size to 11. Okay. That should give our shores a subtle blue glow. Now let's add a gradient fill layer named Land Gradient. It's not a layer style, it's a special kind of layer. So do Alt-LWG. Name, Land Gradient. Mode is normal and opacity is 100%. And when we click OK or hit enter, it will bring up the gradient fill dialog box to finish setting up the layer. So first for the gradient, click the sample gradient bar to load the gradient editor. Here we have some presets at the top and our custom setup at the bottom. We're going to set up 5 color stops by editing the 2 existing color stops and adding 3 more for our total of 5. Now there are opacity stops above the gradient preview bar and color stops below it. Before we set up the color stops, let's make sure our opacity stops are both at 100%. So click the first one, this one's good, and check the rightmost one, and that's 0, so let's set it to 100. If you accidentally hit enter and confirm the gradient settings here, you can just click the sample gradient bar again, no big deal. Okay, so let's set up the color stops, which are below the gradient preview bar. The leftmost color stop will be white. FF, FF, FF. Okay, and the location is 5%. And then click on the rightmost color stop. Color is Papyrus. F0E6BE. Okay. And the location is 100%. Now click the empty space here to add a third stop. Set the color to a dark olive green. 405018. Okay. Location 35%. And add another color stop. The same color is good for this one, that 405018. Location is 60%. And we'll add our 5th and final color stop. So this color is a darker tan. DAC094, and location is 85%. Let's type in a name like Atlas Gradient, and hit New to save it as a preset. I've already done that before, so I'll just click OK to confirm my settings. So you can see this kind of makes a desert to temperate to polar looking color gradient. Don't worry if it's not perfect for you right now, you'll get to customize this later. And let's check the reverse checkbox so that the white is on the top and the tan is on the bottom. Okay. Okay, and we've got our land gradient layer, so you can see the layer thumbnail looks a little bit different. All right, let's add a color overlay layer style, Alt-L-Y-V. Set the blend mode to soft light, color to white, FF, 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 and opacity to 25%. This overlay just brightens the gradient a bit, and that's totally on your preference how bright or not bright you want that color overlay. Okay, group the layers. Now, it is a group with just one layer, but we're gonna add more to it later. Control G, rename the group to Gradient Group. So double click the name, Gradient Group, enter. Create a selection from layer base. So control click the layer thumbnail. Add a reveal selection layer mask on Group Gradient Group, Alt-L-M-V. And set the group's blending mode to hard light. So the drop down box, hard light. Hey, it's starting to look like something. Okay, so collapse Group Gradient Group. Now select Group Gradient Group and Layer Land, so hold Control and click to select each layer. Group the layers, Control G, and rename that group to Land Group. So double click the name, Land Group, enter. All right, let's check to make sure we've got our default colors selected, so D. Now select Group Ocean Group. Add a solid fill layer, Alt-L-W-O. For the name, the default is fine, color fill 1, and color is none. Okay. And now we'll set the color to black when it brings up the dialog box, so 000000. Okay. All right, unhide and select layer mountains. Select color range, Alt-SC. So select will be sampled colors, fuzziness to 200. Okay. Delete selected, delete. Now select all, so Control A. And then we're gonna modify the selection border, Alt-SMB. Set the width to 60. Feather selection, Alt-SMF. Feather radius 25. Okay. Now we're going to subtract layer base shape from the selection. So hold Control and Alt and click on the layer base thumbnail. Now this will only really affect you if your land shape extends to the edge of the canvas. So since mine doesn't, you're not going to see any difference here. All right, once you're done with that, we're going to delete selected, delete, and deselect, Control D. Move and erase mountains as you want. All right, so here we're going to lay out the mountain ranges on the map. Don't worry about the mountains in the water. We'll clean up anything left over in the water at the end of this step. So first, select the eraser tool, E. And in the control panel, we'll set the mode to brush, flow 20%, and then right click on the canvas to set the size to 300. and hardness to 0. Enter. And I'm going to erase some unwanted mountains. Now, let's say I want to move some mountains around. Switch to the lasso tool with L, set the feather to 25 pixels. Now I'll draw a selection around this little range here. Now select the Move tool, V, and I can drag the selected mountains over to where I want them. When I'm done, I'll deselect that, Control D, and go back to the Eraser tool, E. Okay, so I'm just going to have one main mountain range like in the center of my land. And I'm going to grab the lasso tool, L, grab this little guy here, Move tool, V, move it over here, and deselect, Control D. Again, these mountains hanging out in the water will get erased, so I just need to set up the ones in the land areas to my liking. If you want to spend some time setting up your mountains, just pause the video before you move on. Alright, so let's create a selection from layer base. So Control-click the layer thumbnail. Contract the selection, Alt-SMC, contract by 20 pixels. Feather selection, Alt-SMF, feather by 20 pixels. Now we'll invert the selection, Control-Shift-I, delete selected, delete, and deselect, Control D. Okay, select layer Color Fill 1, and delete the layer. Delete, we're done with that one. Now select layer Mountains. Add a color overlay layer style, Alt-LYV. Set the blend mode to soft light. Color to muddy brown, 5A461E. Opacity at 100%. Okay. Now add a bevel and emboss layer style, Alt-LYB. Technique is chisel soft, size 1. Okay. Blending mode to hard light. Let's duplicate the layer and name it Mountains 2. So Control-Alt-J, name Mountains 2. Set the mode to luminosity and the opacity to 25%. Okay. Repeat the last filter with dialog, which was our lighting effects filter again. So Control-Alt-F. Now, if you've closed Photoshop since step 59, just go to the filter menu, render, and lighting effects to do it manually. For CS6, in the control panel, go to presets and Atlas Mountains. And if you're in CS 5.1 or earlier, click the style drop-down box and choose Atlas Mountains. And then click OK to apply the effect. Okay, let's edit the bevel and emboss layer style, Alt-LYB. Set the depth to 83%, size to 29, and soften to 5. Okay. Add a reveal all layer mask, Alt-LMR. A layer mask is like a grayscale image that controls the opacity of the group or layer it modifies. But unlike the general layer opacity setting, a mask can have a shape and a brightness value so it can hide or show specific parts of a layer. White areas are 100% opacity and black is 0% opacity. So by drawing with different shades of gray, black, or white on a layer mask, I am in effect drawing with opacity on the layer itself. Now, right now our layer mask is solid white, so everything in the layer is 100% opacity. And we're going to change that. So let's select the brush tool, B. Make sure the right one is selected, so Shift B if you need to cycle through them. Right now, our Layer Mountains 2 layer mask is selected. So now I'll draw in the image canvas with black, and that's going to hide parts of layer mountains 2. And if I draw with white, it will reveal them again. So remember, you can press X to swap back and forth between your colors, which right now are black and white. And this is pretty subtle because layer mountains 2 is pretty subtle, and layer mountains is also right beneath it, and it looks pretty similar. I'm essentially just softening the mountains a bit when I hide this layer. So duplicate this layer and name it mountains 3. Control Alt J. Name mountains 3. Set the mode to pin light and opacity to 25%. Okay. Okay, repeat the last filter, Control F. And that's the lighting effects filter with Atlas Mountain Style preset we just did a few minutes ago. Now we're going to edit the bevel and emboss layer style, Alt LYB. Depth 100%. Size 13. And soften 1. Okay. Select the Layer Mountains 3 layer mask. So that's the little thumbnail to the right of the regular layer thumbnail. If you notice, the mask of Layer Mountains 3 is the same as Mountains 2. Okay, so select the brush tool again. And just like with Mountains 2, we're going to draw with black on the layer mask to hide areas of Layer Mountains 3, and we'll draw with white to reveal them. Stop whenever you're happy with the results. Okay, so step 109, select layers Mountains, Mountains 2, and Mountains 3, so hold Control and click on each layer to select them. And then group those layers, so Control G. Now rename the group to Mountains Group. Double click the group name, Mountains Group, enter. Now if you don't like the look of layers Mountains 2 and 3, you can just hide those layers. Okay, so hide group Mountains Group and unhide layer Hills, and select layer Hills. Double check default colors, D. Select color range, Alt SC. Set select to sampled colors, fuzziness 150, okay. Delete selected, delete, and deselect, Control D. Okay, now create a selection from layer base, so Control click the layer thumbnail. Contract the selection, Alt SMC, contract by 10 pixels. Feather selection, Alt SMF, feather radius 10 pixels. Invert the selection, Control Shift I, delete selected, delete, and deselect, Control D. Okay, add a color overlay layer style, Alt LYV, blend mode to soft light. Color, it's that same muddy brown. 5A461E, okay. Opacity 100%, okay. And let's add a bevel and emboss layer style, Alt LYB. So style, emboss. Technique is chisel soft. Size 5. Highlight opacity 50%. And shadow opacity 50%. Okay. Now set the layer blending mode to soft light and the opacity to 50%. And that's looking pretty decent. Okay, now unhide all the layers except layer base. And I expand my groups to make sure they're all visible. Now expand group land group. Okay, I'm just gonna widen my layers panel a bit. Okay, and select group gradient group. Create a new layer and name it land adjust. So Control Shift N, name land adjust. Set the mode to color dodge and opacity to 25%. Okay. Now this layer should be above group gradient group. If layer land adjust was by chance created inside group gradient group like this, just drag it up above the group so it's like this. Okay, create a selection from layer base. Control-click the layer thumbnail. Set the foreground color to dark olive green. So over in the Tools panel, click the foreground color and set that to 405018. Then set the background color to Papyrus. So Tools panel, click the background color. Set it to F0E6BE. And render a clouds filter. So filter menu, render clouds. Then deselect, Control D. So that just bumps our colors up a bit.